So let's talk a little bit about how do you divide the work with the credit partner. So there's many elements of a deal, but you don't need to handle them alone, right? That's what I love about partnering. With a credit partner, you can split things up. You can split things up however you guys want, whatever your situation is. You can split it up based on that. So it's usually more effective to specialize in one or two of the deal elements and collaborate with someone who brings complementary skills. So for example, maybe you have a lot of money and you're not good at finding deals yet. You could find someone who's looking for credit partners and partner with them on a deal. Or maybe you're like, man, Nate and Edmund have been teaching me how to find deals left and right. I'm gonna go ahead and find awesome deals, and then I'm gonna talk about it on social media and attract partners. If you can get really good at, like, say, finding deals, you don't need a lot of money. You just need the skills to find the good deals.
Welcome to Real Estate to Freedom, the podcast that helps you create the active life you've always wanted through passive income investments. Now, here are your hosts, Dr. Nate and Becky Lambert.
All right, guys. Well, I was telling a few people earlier, we're going to be talking about using other people's money. And first, we're going to talk about how to do it with credit partners. It's a little bit similar to seller finance with some different twists. And then we're also going to talk about private and hard money and kind of help you understand what exactly that means and how to use private and hard money to do all the deals you want to do without using your own money. So let me first of all tell you my story of my first credit partner. So this was about 12 years ago. I purchased my first rental property on my own credit. So exciting. I'm like, yes, got my first rental. This is a picture of it. It's in Mesa, Arizona. And I had a little money left in my home equity line of credit. So I used a HELOC, right, to get my first rental property. The property I bought in 2011 went up in value, and I'm like, sweet, I'm going to make the most of this. But as with the professor's salary, I was like, man, I want another deal, but how do I do this? I didn't have enough money for a large down payment, right? These traditional loans take a big down payment. So I'm like, and I wasn't going to be able to qualify based on I was only making $64,000 a year. So I'm like, what am I going to do? So I wanted to get my next deal, and I was anxious to make it happen. So I shared my investing story with another professor. I was a psychology professor at the time, and his name was Bryce. I told him what I was doing. He's like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. But he didn't know where to look, how to make it happen. So we teamed up to find a house together. We had a realtor on our team looking for houses in the Mesa area. We wanted to get another one like that. So I said, hey, I'll give you $14,000. That's how much I had left on my credit line. And I'll help you find the deal. And then let's have you use your credit, and we'll split the equity. So that's what we did, and it worked out fantastically. When I made these slides, we still own the property, but recently we sold it, and as we 10x'd our investment. So, it was a great investment, right? I mean, obviously it was helped by some market appreciation, but that was an awesome start to my credit partner path. And you guys can do this too. You just need to be a little bit ahead of the next person, and you can get credit partners to pair up and do these deals with you. And, I've done this over a dozen times. I have over a dozen credit partners and very few problems, actually. So really, guys, I mean, without a war chest filled with millions of dollars, it's hard to keep growing at the speed that you want without collaborating in some capacity. And I'm going to share with you tonight my strategies for how I find these people and how I figure out the partnership dynamics, all that kind of stuff, because it can be a win for everybody. It's been every credit partner I've had has cashed out big time from the rentals that we bought together. And then it can also help you to reach your financial independence number of properties that we talked about. A lot of you guys, you need to get 15, 20, sometimes even 30 or more properties to hit that goal. So this is going to help you to do it sooner. Now, obviously, you're only going to maybe own half of the property. So you're going to need to get twice as many with a credit partner. But it's still, you don't have to use your own money or your own credit. So it's definitely worth it. So let's talk a little bit about how to do this. How do you divide the work with the credit partner? So there's many elements of a deal, but you don't need to handle them alone, right? That's what I love about partnering. With a credit partner, you can split things up. You can split things up however you guys want, whatever your situation is. You can split it up based on that. So it's usually more effective to specialize in one or two of the deal elements and collaborate with someone who brings complementary skills. So for example, maybe you have a lot of money and you're not good at finding deals yet. You could find someone who's looking for credit partners and partner with them on a deal. Or maybe you're like, man, Nate and Edmund have been teaching me how to find deals left and right. I'm gonna go ahead and find awesome deals, and then I'm gonna talk about it on social media and attract partners. If you can get really good at, like, say, finding deals, you don't need a lot of money. You just need the skills to find the good deals. So these are the 6 key elements of a deal that you can split up however you deem necessary. So we talked about finding, right? In some ways, that's one of the harder parts of doing it. That's why, you definitely need to show up in 2 weeks. And the more you can, and you can't just find them on the MLS, right? On the multiple listing service, because most of those deals aren't below market value. You really need to get good at finding deals that are below, that are a discount. And then, all right, so credit, right? So that's usually, it's cheaper, not always, right? In today's market with the heightened interest rates, bank loans aren't as cheap as they used to be, but still, it's typically cheaper to get a bank loan on these long-term deals. A hard money lender we're going to talk about later on, they're usually about 12% interest annually. So even an 8% is, going to be oftentimes better. So, and especially don't use cash, right? So in this game, like we talked about, your goal isn't to pay things off. So you want to, I always recommend, unless you've hit your threshold, let's say, your rentals in your area are making $1,000 a month, you could do the 20, you could buy 20. If that's your goal, to get $20,000 a month, then that's great. But you're not going to get there buying them in cash, right? It's going to take you forever unless you have just millions of dollars sitting around, which I don't think most of us do. You don't always have this available. Maybe you can't qualify. Maybe you don't have the credit. Or maybe you just, after about 4 houses, it becomes really hard to qualify because the bank is pretty strict about their requirements. So just like in my situation, I had to find someone with good credit. Usually you want 720 credit score is going to be the better rates and terms that you're going to get. You often still qualify with the 680, but it's going to be not as good terms usually. Sometimes some banks will go lower, but usually you need at least a 680 to get into the game. And then there's money, right? So some people might even have the credit, but they don't have the down payment money. I mean, in my market, you have to bring, and if it's for a rental property, you usually need to put 20% down. So, in my market, it's usually about $90,000 for an entry-level house. That's a decent amount of cash that a lot of people don't have. I know in David's market, he can pick houses up in Texas for like $100,000, right? So it just depends on where you're at. But a lot of people don't have the cash to put those down payments. So that's why you're going to need to find someone with that money. And we'll show you how to find them, because the 20% down, as I pointed out, can be tough. Then there's management. So even if you have a property manager, which is what I recommend, it's You don't want to be going around collecting rent. You want to be finding the next deal and putting it together, right? You don't want to be showing potential tenants the property. You want someone else that's a professional to do that. But there's still some management that needs to be done, right? You got to manage the property manager, because guys, there's a lot of not so honest property managers that will try to steal from you. I hate to say it, but that's the truth. So you got to have someone looking over the books, making sure that they're being fair with you. Oftentimes you got to rehab it before you put it up for rent. So you got to find the contractor, you got to look things over, plan things out with them. Becky, my sweet wife, she just made a Facebook Live. You can go check her Facebook out. She just showed one of her rentals that she's had for several years, and she just went with the contractor. Actually, 2 or 3 contractors. We try and get bids from multiple contractors, and she redesigned. She took this house that was 2 bedrooms, and she's turning it into 5 bedrooms, guys. She's adding about $150,000 into the value of the house by adding bedrooms, which, especially in a place like Utah with all our big families, can add a lot of value. So you want to, get some professionals to weigh in, and that management side of things can be time intensive. And again, to get the best deals, you usually want to get more than one bid. So that takes some time, takes some bartering, some negotiating skills. That's all an important part of it, that management. And then once the property has been rehabilitated, and again, if you're going to rent it out, you don't want to go all out, right? I'll often take these kitchens that have the old cabinets, and instead of replacing everything, guys, I'll often just paint it white or gray, right? These are hit colors these days, and it's like you just paint it, and then often I'll have the contractor replace the hardware so it looks kind of more clean and fresh. It's obvious that it's not a brand new kitchen with brand new cabinets, but that's a little hack that I can give you to save a lot on costs. Is just consider painting some of these things, and then it'll look really nice. Now, if it's in an upscale neighborhood and you're going to sell it as a flip, then you might want to consider doing a more full remodel. But if you're going to rent it and it's more of an entry level, which are usually the ones that cash flow, try and do, I like to say, lipstick on a pig. So lipstick on a pig. That does take some time to either put it up on, find the property manager if you're going to rent it out, put up ads, all that kind of stuff, or find a realtor, get listed on the market if you're going to sell it. But usually if you're doing a credit partnership, you're typically going to go rent it out, right? Because otherwise, if you're going to flip it, you want to do more of a hard money lender. So there's a lot of work that's involved in talking to potential renters or buyers. And there's a lot of paperwork that needs to be completed. So that's an important task for what one of you needs to head up on. And the key is you gotta be dividing this out. You gotta have really clear communication and have a contract in place that specifies who's doing what. Because people have short-term memories. And if it's not written down and signed, sometimes people are going to forget. The last element is expertise. So having an experienced partner is a huge asset, right? Because they've been there, done that. They've seen several deals go down. And typically you don't want a brand new person as your partner if you're pretty new too. So look for someone that has some experience if you're brand new. Now, some of the guys on here have been doing this for a while, so they would be an ideal partner for someone who's brand new, right? That's the power of the network, right? So we have our Tuesday calls that are just for our elite investing team, and a lot of times we'll partner on deals like this. And again, an experienced partner can make sure that the deal's on track to make good money. And they'll just make sure that everything's being taken into account. They'll be looking, like a small little thing that I've noticed is a lot of people, when they're trying to sell a house, will be like, hey, I'm going to offer $399,000, because that looks like it's less than 400. And so I'm going to get a lot more people. Well, the crazy thing is that that's actually totally wrong. What you should do is list it if you're getting close to $100,000 mark. I always go to flat even, and here's why. It's because, guys, if you list it 399, then anyone who's looking at 400 and above is not going to see your listing. So if you list it 400 and above, then you catch it, because you got to remember people are putting in their search parameters online, and usually it's in increments of $50,000, sometimes 20,000 at the lower end. So in other words, you gotta have you if you put it even at 400,000 on the listing, then you're going to attract people who listed that they're looking for houses from 3 to 400,000. You're also going to capture the people that put that they're listing it, that they're looking for houses from 400 to 500,000, right? So you want to capture as many people as you can when you're listing a property. And that's just one of those little things that someone who's with experience should get. Not all of them do, but you want to find someone who has that experience, because then they're taking these kinds of things into account. So Becky actually got her first deal. She bought this house that we're standing in front of. She was the credit partner. Okay, she had some guy she had a crush on, and this guy's like, hey, why don't we use your credit? And so they bought this house that had 6 bedrooms. She lived in it with roommates and rented it out to all of her roommates. She went on an LDS mission and was cash flowing on the house while she was gone for a year and a half. Anyway, it was an awesome first deal. So again, like I said, you want to have everything spelled out in a contract that you both sign. And you want to say, all right, how much, based on these 6 things that that we just talked about, these things we're pitching in on, how are we going to divide up the cash flow? Is it going to be 50-50? What? Obviously, you got to pay your expenses, but anything above and beyond that, you want to decide what percentage you're going to split. And usually, if you're giving 3 and they're giving 3, it can be even. It doesn't have to be if you value a down payment more. It's totally up to you guys to decide. You just have to both agree on it, right? Appreciation over time. So that's, spell that out in the contract. You want to decide. Usually you divide it. It doesn't have to be the same as the cash flow, but a lot of the times I make a lot of my contracts just 50-50, because I try to figure out where we're both pitching in a similar way. But it doesn't have to be. It can be whatever you guys decide. You can factor the appreciation differently. Or, for example, tax benefits. So for me, you can depreciate a property over 27 and a half years. So that's a lot of tax benefit. Now, if you're a real estate professional, which means you have to put in about 14 hours a week. If you put in 14 hours a week, you can qualify as a real estate professional. And in that case, you can get what's called bonus depreciation. So if you have a $400,000 rental, you could potentially get a $100,000 write-off, which is amazing. So truthfully, I've often, with my partners, I've negotiated to get all of the bonus depreciation, because I often need it more than people are just getting started and aren't paying much in taxes. And then I'll give them more cash flow in exchange. So that's the cool thing. You can negotiate, you can work it however you guys want as credit partners. And then there's the equity, right? That's another benefit that can be shared with the partner. As the mortgage is paid down by the tenants, right? Like we talked about, their first priority every month is to pay down your mortgage for you. And as they do, then that debt, the bank for the mortgage, goes down. Every month that goes down. And so your equity increases. So how are you going to divide that up? And then, like, hey, if it's a short-term rental, for example, you might want to use it. Heck, we a lot of our investors on our development projects in North Carolina, which, by the way, it didn't get hit at all by the hurricane, which is awesome. We picked an area that doesn't get, it's part of the hurricane zone, which is we give our partners, which means they contribute money. They're not actively like making decisions on the deal. we give them a chance to stay a week in the at Oak Island. That is something that you could negotiate. Usually, unless you're doing short-term rental, or let's say you have a son that wants to rent the basement, that could be something you negotiate in, to see if so that's one of the benefits that you can negotiate as part of what you're talking about. So this is Becky's first deal. We just paid it off not too long ago. In 19 years that she owned it, she had $556,000 in rental income, about $166,000 in expenses and mortgage. So overall, she made close to $200,000 in net cash flow after her expenses. The appraised value is $610,000, and then she got about $25,000 in tax savings from depreciation. So this one house with this credit partner, and she was the credit partner, has made her about $824,000 in income and or equity. So it's amazing, especially as you hold on to these rentals, what kind of numbers you can see on these. Let's talk a little bit about how to have a discussion with the credit partner, because this is so important. I know a lot of you are like, and by the way, there's a whole chapter in my book on this, but it's important to structure this conversation in a way that's going to give you the best chance of succeeding to close the credit on partnering with you. That's an important piece. The first thing you got to do is find a deal with cash flow, right? Heck, if it doesn't have cash flow, who wants to do a deal that doesn't really even pencil? So you got to show that it will cash flow after all the expenses. So each of those are about 10% of the gross rent. It's a good way to calculate those expenses. Okay, so after all those things, hey, you show that it can still cash flow. That's awesome. So the next step is to create what's called a pro forma. It's a document that illustrates to your credit partner all the expenses. You want them to see that you are being thorough. You found out maybe what the average costs are, utilities from the previous owner, and then you show, all the mortgage, all of these things, and show them, hey, we're going to set this much for repairs, this much for property management. All of these things you want to list your credit partners like, oh man, Paul has done an amazing job at really spelling this out. I feel like I can really trust and do a deal with Paul. Dude, this guy's the man. Look at this. He's so thorough. And then you want to explain the risks, right? If you act no risks in real estate, people are going to be skeptical. They're like, oh, this sounds too good to be true. This person's just kind of pitching me on something that isn't really realistic. So you always want to spell it out and be really clear what the risks are, right? I mean, if the values drop and then you have like, a big repair like a sewer line and rents go down. Rents almost always go up, but they can go down sometimes, right? There are risks. You have property insurance that will cover a lot of those risks if the tenant messes with the house and does damage, but there's still some risks there. So that's why I always tell my partners, hey, we need my rule of thumb. We have $5,000 in our slush fund at all times so that we can cover some expenses. Because what you don't want to have happen is if you have it, when you have, not if, but when you have it needs to be, a furnace that needs to be redone, you don't want to have to like go after your partner and, hey, we really need some money, and they're like, I just don't have any money right now. And then what are you going to do? Like, you kind of need to get that fixed. So you're going to want to make sure you have a sleep well at night fund that you just cover, make sure that you have some of the costs to cover some expenses that always come up. So you want to do a really thorough job of explaining the risks to your partner so that they can know exactly what they're getting into. Like I mentioned, the insurance can cover a lot of the challenges. And then the next step is to find out what is most important to your credit partner. For me, like I mentioned, it's the tax benefits. I mean, I've just done an amazing job at not having to pay much in income tax because I'm smart with buying rentals, right? But for my partners, like I mentioned, a lot of them, it's like really the cash flow is really important. So figure out what's most important and just ask them, hey, there's these four main things. Which of these is important to you? And heck, if their most important is not your most important thing, that's a great way to barter and negotiate, right? If you both share the same important thing, then you can figure out how to split that fairly. It's just helpful to know what's the most important. And then, just like in any negotiation, you want to give them as much as you can, but get as much as you can. Like I say, I mean, who knows? Like a lot of people don't need the tax write-off, right? Maybe you really do. So find that out and then negotiate. And then the next step is have a lender ready to get the credit partner pre-approved. So it's awesome if you're like, hey, this person's on board. But if you're like, sometimes they'll be like, yeah, yeah, my credit's good. We're good to go. But you don't want to go and go too far the road if, like you don't want to lose your earnest money on the purchase. If you find out that your credit partner's credit has dropped to 620 and maybe they didn't even know that. So I like to have a lender that I know, like, and trust that's done good stuff for me in the past. And I'll have that lender call the person, get them pre-approved. I just want to make sure that they are legit able to be a good credit partner for me. So again, credit partners can be a great way to expand your portfolio much more quickly than you could on your own. And they can also contribute far more than credit alone. It's so nice. I've had my credit partners, they're excited to get experience. So I'll usually have my credit partners do most of the management. And that saves me so much time to go find the next deal and the next deal. And they get the learning experience. So it's like, hey, this is awesome. It's a win-win. Take some action today. Look, go find a property or make a list of some people that who be willing to be a credit partner for you. And what I like to say is, like, if you're not sure, I would even post on social media, say, look at this house I just got under contract. Who wants to partner with me on it? You don't have to specify exactly what that would look like, but I found a lot of people by just saying, hey, who wants to partner with me on this? Social media can be an amazing in terms of finding partners. So make it happen. I've just to share, I made a post in a lot of the groups. We just closed on a deal that I did with a credit partner. I got it with Pill, my credit partner. We had some ups and downs. I share those in the Facebook post. Again, you can look that up on my personal page or in any of the groups I posted about that. The cool thing was, so even though we had ups and downs, we had a few things that didn't go as well as I'd hoped, which I won't get into right now just for the sake of time. But the cool thing was, at the end of the day, we sold it for about twice as much as we bought it for. And we sold it on seller financing. We got it, the mortgage, for about 3.5%. We sold it at 8%. And so because of that higher purchase price and the more than doubling of the interest rate, guys, we are making $2,200 a month in cash flow. So that's how you can combine both things, right? And $2,200, because of that cash flow, we're gonna put all that into paying off the mortgage fast, and we're gonna have about $450,000 sitting in equity in that house in about 5 years from now. We're gonna have that mortgage paid off and have almost $500,000. And what about business credit cards for 12 to 18 months? I wouldn't say it's better than a credit partner because that could be good for a down payment. But the problem with those business cards, and I've used them, I use Fund and Grow. It's been awesome. Is that it changes to 18, 29% interest after a year, and so if this is a long-term play for you, most of my rentals are, it's not going to be ideal because that's because the interest rate goes up so much. If you have a way to get that money back out, I mean, it could be a good solution for a down payment. Let's jump in now and talk about uh, hard and private money. So we want to show you guys how to do this with very little of your own money and maybe even none of your own money, maybe none of your own credit. So we talked a lot about rentals. This strategy is going to be, you can use this with rentals. But it's especially good for flips. So you don't have to put any of your own money in to make this happen. So let me tell you two stories. Start with the story of Chad. Chad had $200,000 in his savings account, and he wanted to use that money to flip houses. So he really just hated the idea of paying money lenders, which, well, some of you guys have been in that situation. You're just like, I don't want to pay these money lenders. So instead of just paying a hard money lender, he's like, he found a house and invested his savings, like all that $200,000. And in 6 months, Chad earned $30,000. You can save, I found it usually costs about 5% of the sales value, the after repair value, is about how much you pay a hard money lender and private money lenders. So that's not, I mean, that is a decent amount of cash, 5%. But if you find a good enough deal, I'll show you how it works out a lot better. So here's the problem with Chad, is because he had all his money tied up, he couldn't pursue another deal, couldn't find another deal until the first one was closed. So he had limited funds during that whole time. And because the whole process took, 8 to 10 months, Chad was only averaging like maybe a deal a year sometimes. He couldn't even start looking for the next deal until he got paid out, because you gotta have the money to buy the deal, right? So the other problem is that losing money on a deal can be really bad, especially when it's all the money in your savings account, right? So if Chad ever lost money, he'd be really hesitant to risk his money again, because again, all of his savings are put in there, so that stress is high. Whereas a hard money lender, we're going to talk about, they know the risks, they're professional investors. And I always tell people, hey, if you show your deal to a hard money lender and they turn you down, that's a bad sign, right? You should walk away from that deal. You should not do a deal that is done by the hard money lender. Now, there's the story of Kapil. So Kapil had $200,000 in his savings account, but the last thing he wanted to do was to use that money. He had more of an abundance mindset, guys. He was willing to share a portion of the profit with a money lender. Why not share? Let other people make some money too, especially if it helps you do more deals. So he recognized that he could do a lot more. He could make his money go way further if he was using other people's money, which I like to call OPM. And so as a result, Kapil was always flipping between 5 and 14 houses at a time, because his only limitation was his bandwidth in managing the project, right? So I've had as many as 14 houses going at once. So although he sacrificed 10 to 20% of the profits, so the 5% is like the total amount, but you're gonna cut into your profits a little bit with that, like I said. He made up for it in the increased volume. So despite sharing the profits, Kapil felt secure with that 200,000. That could be used as that sleep well at night fund. If there are some losses, like heaven forbid, I've never lost anyone's money. I have lost money on 2 or 3 deals before, but because I had the money in reserves, I used my own money to pay my private money lenders. So that's how you want to do it. So because your reputation is so important, so you never want to lose someone else's money. So unlike Chad, Phil wasn't afraid of the losses because he had reserves ready to use. So that made him feel a lot more secure, like it wasn't gonna just take him out. Let me just strengthen my case here for why I believe you should never use your own money on a flip. For one, like I pointed out in these two stories, it limits you in how many deals you can do. Like Chad was only able to do one deal at a time with his 200,000. Way better to use that money as your backup, use other people's money. The other thing is it turns your brain off of finding mode, right? If you don't have the money to find to do the deal, you're like, I don't know, I can't, I just don't have the money. So why would you even be looking for properties if you don't have any way to pay for it, right? So it's gonna hinder you in finding more deals. Instead, what I like to tell everyone, my elite investors, I always say this, just have that abundance mindset. Like even make it an affirmation, like I have unlimited money. Look at yourself every morning in the mirror and say, I have unlimited money. Because again, if you're good at finding deals, you do have unlimited money and you're mentally ready to take them on. If it's a really good deal, the money will find you. I mean, you gotta obviously like talk about it, share about it, get on the phone, make Facebook posts, but you can make it happen. Okay. And then it also limits your reserves. Again, if you're trying to scale this up, you want to have increasing amounts of reserves. So if you're using your own money, for the deal, then you don't have as much for reserves. And it's harder to scale that way. And then of course, you wanna, this kind of goes without saying, but it's good to just speak it openly. You never want to use other people's money for anything outside of what you said it would be used for. You could go to jail for that, right? So be smart about it. A hard money lender, guys, is a professional investor who specializes in lending to other investors. So that's why I say, hey, a hard money lender is a good person to have on your team, because if your deal sucks, they won't give you money. So it's a good way to check to make sure your deal is actually good. And the cool thing is you don't have to fill out a million forms like they do with bank loans. You get to just they don't even check your credit. They don't run your credit. They're basing their loan on the deal. Does the deal make sense? Because some of them want to see a track record, but a lot of them won't give money to brand new investors. And by the way, you can find these people on social media. You can go to Facebook groups and type in real estate investing, Cincinnati, if you live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and find a Facebook group of real estate investing and join that and say, hey, who are my hard money lenders out there? I'm looking to flip some deals. And you'll get people saying, hey, pick me. I'll be your hard money lender. That's the thing, guys. Like, if you can be good at finding deals, the money will come to you, because these hard money lenders are fighting over my business, right? They're like, I want to lend you some money. Can I take you to lunch and tell you why? Let's build a relationship so you feel loyalty to me. I mean, that happens all the time. And again, it's based on property, not on your credit. So even if your credit sucks for whatever reason, doesn't matter. Like, as long as the deal's good, you can still get it. Now, the thing they do require, though, is they do want to make sure you have some skin in the game. So this is why hard money lenders are very, smart investors, right? They're gonna look at the deal and I'm only gonna give you about, most of them will only give you about 70 to maybe 80% of the purchase price, and they're not gonna give you the money to rehab it. And why do they do that? Because if you suck, if you screw this up, they're gonna foreclose and take the property from you. If you're not making payments, they can take it back, and then they'll maybe finish the property themselves. But if they've only bought it at 70 cents on the dollar, then they could still turn a profit. But you can see, if they give you all the money to buy it and you screw up, then they're in trouble. So they're smart investors, and that's why they're professionals. And because they're professionals, they charge 2 to 3% of the loan amount. If you get a hard money loan of $100,000, you're going to pay about $2,000. Sometimes that's upfront. Sometimes you pay it on the back end when the property closes. Those are the ones I like to do typically, but some of them won't do that. But yeah, so you can pay them an origination fee and then pay the rest when it closes. And they're going to charge you between 10 to 16% interest annually. So if they're charging you, let's say 12% interest, and you do the property in 6 months, then you pay 6%, right? Plus the 2% origination costs. So, on $100,000 loan, you'd pay maybe $6,000 in interest if it goes 6 months, and you'd pay, $2,000 upfront. So you give that hard money lender about $8,000. But why not, if you end up making $50,000, why not give $8,000 of that to the hard money lender to help you get more and do more deals? So it's totally worth it. You just want to make sure that your profit margins are good enough to be able to pay the hard money lender and then pass on it. If they're like, no, I don't like that deal, then walk away, run away from that deal. All right, now here's the difference between a hard money lender and a private money lender. A private money lender isn't a professional investor typically. That's why we call them private money lenders. And so you might be able to get better terms from them. They're just ordinary people looking to get a good return. And they love the fact that you're backing their money with real estate. I always tell them that. Look, I say, hey, I'm going to put a lien on my property in your name, and I can't sell this house until I pay you back with interest, right? That's how you always want to set it up. You want to put a lien at the time that you buy it. And so you're protecting them. And let them know that as one of your selling points. So sometimes people can get private money for even like as little as 6%. That's not as common these days, but it's possible. Just say, hey, what would make this interesting to you? Let them talk first. Maybe they say 8%. You're like, oh, it's a lot, but I guess we could do that, right? You never want them to think that they're asking way too little, right? Because that's just kind of good negotiation tactics. So the private money individual is willing to lend you large amounts, then you don't need a hard money lender. But typically, again, I had one guy say, hey, I have 600,000 I'd love to lend you. Well, that's when I ramped up to doing 14 flips rather than using that 600,000 on 1.5, 2 properties. I used hard money lenders and used the private money guy for my rehab budget, right? That was my rehab budget and buying the last 20% of the house, right? Because the hard money lenders usually won't pay more than 80% of the purchase price. So you need both if you're going to if you're going to do this without using your own money. Now, what I like to tell a lot of people is like, hey, a lot of you guys are part of Replace Your Mortgage. You have home equity credit lines. Or maybe if you don't have one, I mean, you can go get one, right? You don't have to be part of that group to get a HELOC, but they just help you in a lot of ways to get it. So what I like to tell people is you could be your own private money lender from your HELOC. Use a hard money lender and then use your HELOC for the additional amount, because private money lenders are a little harder to find. They're not the ones knocking on your door. They're harder to get. So if you don't have as much experience, you're nervous about asking friends or relatives to be your private money lender, you could use your HELOC as your private money, and then make sure you post about the deal on social media. And then next time you do a deal, hopefully you have a private money lender. You could be like, hey, we got another deal. We made 50,000 on this one. Who wants to partner with me? Just make sure you don't say, I guarantee you a 12% interest rate, because then they'll get you in trouble. But you can always say, hey, who wants to partner with me? And then discuss the terms privately. So that's my favorite way to get private money lenders, is through social media. So as a private money investor, work with an experienced investor who selects more profitable deals. So usually if you're going to be a private money lender, I wouldn't lend to a very brand new real estate investor. I'd look for someone with more experience, because being a private money lender is more risky. And here's why. if something goes wrong with the deal, guess who's getting paid first? The hard money lender. The hard money lender is always going to be in what's called first position, which means they get paid first at time of the sale. And then any money left over will go to the private money lender. And then if there's still money, then the investor will get the rest, right?
Thanks for listening to Real Estate to Freedom with Dr. Nate and Becky Lambert. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. You can download their free ebooks and workshops by visiting realestatetoFreedom.com.